The audience filled Boston's Symphony Hall. 3,000 people in reverent silence waited for the first chord of the evening. André Rieu lifted the bow of his Stradivarius, and the golden lights reflected on his face. But before the orchestra could begin, an unexpected sound cut through the air. A child's voice, trembling, rang out from the stands, weak but loaded with emotion. "When the stars are falling, can you hear my song?" The audience turned around, confused. A blind girl wearing a simple light blue dress sang with closed eyes. In her hand, a small wooden music box played a melody that seemed to accompany her singing. André slowly lowered his bow. Something in that melody struck him with force. "Stop! Stop the music!" he commanded. The murmur of the audience died. Even the television cameras turned toward the girl. "Who's singing there?" André asked, his voice echoing through the microphone. The security guards hesitated, but he made a determined gesture. "Let her come, bring her here." The crowd made room as the girl's mother led her to the stage. With each step, the music box kept playing, and André felt his heart accelerate. The melody, he knew it. When Ren stood before him, the maestro knelt, his eyes full of tears. "Little one, who taught you that song?" She smiled shyly. "My grandma, sir. She said you wrote it for her." The audience held its breath. André turned pale, staggering. "What did you say your grandmother's name was?" "Eleanor Ashford." The bow slipped from his hand and fell with a dry clap on the ground. For several seconds no one breathed. André looked up at the Boston sky and whispered, almost without voice, "Eleanor, you kept your promise." The girl pressed the music box against her chest, and at that moment the stage lights flickered. Her voice returned, pure, crystal clear. And for a brief moment, everyone swore they saw golden reflections in the child's sightless eyes, as if she, through the music, finally saw the man before her. Hours before the concert, Boston seemed to sigh with summer. The cafe tables around Copley Square were full, and the distant sound of rehearsals from the Johann Strauss Orchestra echoed between the historic buildings. People gathered to listen, even from afar. There was something magical about watching André Rieu play in one of America's most beloved cities. On a discreet corner, near Trinity Church, Ren held her mother's hand. The sun warmed her face, but she couldn't see it. She had been born blind, and the only image she knew of the world was sound. People's laughter, the church bells, and especially the music box she had inherited from her grandmother, Eleanor Ashford. Every day Marlowe, her mother, took her downtown to sing, not for money, but because the girl said the square breathed music. Her voice, soft and hesitant, drew moved glances. "Softly, Ren," Marlowe said. "You don't have to sing so loud." But Ren only smiled. "When I sing, I hear the light, Mum." That afternoon, a man observed from afar. Dashiell, sound technician for Rieu's concert, stopped when he recognized something strange, the melody from the girl's music box. He had heard it before, in an old tape archive of the maestros, an unfinished concept never released, only titled 4E. Intrigued, Dashiell came closer, but before he could ask anything, a producer called him back to the stage. He saved the thought. Just another coincidence, he thought. Meanwhile, in the dressing room, André Rieu watched his violin rest on blue velvet. That evening was special. It had been 35 years since the concert that had changed his career. The sound of applause was already forming outside. He breathed deeply, but something troubled him. An old feeling, a distant memory. A name that the wind seemed to whisper through the open windows. "Eleanor?" The clock struck 8. The lights came on. The audience stood. André smiled, raised his bow, and without knowing it, a cycle that was about to close began at that moment. Outside, Ren pressed the music box against her chest. The melody began to play by itself, and without understanding why, the girl murmured softly, "I feel like he's listening." The first chord of the Blue Danube had barely begun when another note mixed with the air. A child's voice, weak but full of emotion, began to sing among the audience. André Rieu looked up, surprised. That melody wasn't part of the program, yet there was something in it that tightened his chest. A sequence of notes he would recognize anywhere. He lowered his bow and murmured into the microphone, "Stop the music." The orchestra immediately fell silent. The murmur grew between the rows of seats. Cameras turned, trying to identify where the sound was coming from, until a beam of light found a girl of about 10 years old, blonde hair in braids, singing with closed eyes. Little Ren. She held a dark wooden music box in her hands, from which came the same theme she was singing, off-key and sweet. The entire audience turned around, curious. "Who is that girl?" André asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Security approached, but he gestured to stop. "Let her come. Let her sing." Marlowe, startled, tried to prevent it, but the crowd made room. Under the gaze of thousands, Wren was led to the stage. André knelt before her. "What's your name, little one?" "Wren," she answered, smiling shyly. "And that song, who taught it to you?" Wren pressed the music box tight. "My grandma. She said she got it from you, a long time ago." Her name was Eleanor. The name made the air disappear from André's lungs. The audience watched in absolute silence. The maestro reached out and lightly touched the music box. The sound coming from it was identical to the melody he had written 35 years earlier, on a night of pain and loneliness. He closed his eyes. Time folded double, and for a moment he saw the face of Eleanor Ashford, the woman he had loved and lost, smiling under the lights of Vienna. But suddenly a cold shiver ran down his back. Why had Eleanor never returned this music box to him? Why had she disappeared without explanation 35 years ago, precisely on the evening he was going to confess his love? Dashiell, watching from the side of the stage, felt his stomach turn. He had heard that melody before, not only in the archive but also in whispers among old technicians. There was a story, a secret that André had never told, a story about a promise that was never kept. Marlowe, holding her daughter, saw the expression on André's face change. There was not only recognition there was guilt, deep, old guilt. "Mr. Rieu," she said carefully, "my mother, she often spoke about you. She said you were the only one who understood her when no one else did." André looked at her, his eyes widening. "Your mother, is she left us 5 years ago, but before she went, she told Wren that this music box would one day return to you. She said it was a promise." The audience shifted uncomfortably. No one understood what was happening, but everyone felt the tension. André stood slowly. His hands trembled. I need to explain this," he began, but his voice broke. At that moment, another sound was heard, faint but clear. It came from the music box itself. Wren pressed it against her ear and frowned. "Mom, there's something inside, something that moves." Marlowe carefully took the music box and opened the lid. Inside, hidden under the mechanism, was a small folded piece of paper, old, yellowed, but carefully preserved. Dashiell came closer, his curiosity overcoming protocols. "What is that?" André's face turned completely pale as Marlowe unfolded the paper. It was a letter, written in Eleanor's elegant handwriting. "To my beloved André, if you ever hear this, know that the music never lied, but I did. Forgive me." The silence that followed was deafening. The audience, now fully absorbed in the drama unfolding, leaned forward. André's hand trembled as he took the letter. His eyes scanned the words, and with each sentence, his face grew paler. "No," he whispered, "this can't be true." Dashiell looked over his shoulder and read along. His eyes widened. "Maestro, this says that Eleanor—" "Quiet," André interrupted sharply. He quickly folded the letter and put it in his pocket, but it was too late. Marlowe had also read it, and her face now showed not compassion but something else. Confusion mixed with the beginning of understanding. "Mr. Rieu," she said slowly, "my mother, she wasn't just a violinist, was she?" André looked at Wren, who understood nothing of the tension, but felt that something had changed. "This is not the moment," he said firmly. "We need to talk privately." But the audience didn't want privacy. They wanted answers. The murmur grew. A cameraman, not knowing what to do, kept the camera on André. The image was being broadcast live to millions of viewers in dozens of countries. André suddenly realized where he was, in the middle of a stage, under the eyes of the entire world, while a secret from his past unfolded like a flower in spring. He had to make a decision. Now. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice trembling but powerful, "what you're seeing tonight is not just music. It's a story I've hidden for 35 years. The murmur stopped. Everyone listened. Eleanor Ashford was not just a violinist. She was— he swallowed hard. "She was the woman I was going to marry. But on the evening of our engagement, she disappeared, without a word, without explanation. I searched for her everywhere, for years." Marlowe's eyes filled with tears. "And now," André continued, looking at Wren, "I discover that she kept this melody, our song, and passed it on to her granddaughter, a girl I never knew existed." He turned to Marlowe. "Your mother. Did she have other children?" Marlowe nodded slowly. "Yes, my brother. He lives in Chicago." "And your father?" Marlowe hesitated. "I never met him. Mom never spoke about him." The implication hung in the air like an invisible cloud. Dashiell whispered to another technician, "This is getting insane." And then, as if fate decided to play one last card, Wren's music box began playing again on its own. But now the melody was different. It sounded fuller, richer, as if a second voice had joined. Everyone looked amazed at the small wooden box. "That's impossible," Dashiell muttered. "There's only one mechanism in there." But the music kept coming, doubly layered, harmonious. Wren, holding the music box, suddenly smiled. "Grandma says it's time," she whispered. "What?" Marlowe asked, bending toward her daughter. "Grandma says Mr. André must tell the truth. Now." A cold gust of wind blew across Symphony Hall, though it was a windless evening. André felt shivers run down his back. "Eleanor," he whispered to the night air, and in that moment, under the stars of Boston, before 3,000 breathless spectators, the maestro made the most difficult decision of his life. "There's more," he said, his voice barely audible. "Much more, and you all deserve to hear the truth." André led Marlowe and Wren to the dressing room, followed by Dashiell. The audience, shocked and fascinated, remained seated, waiting for what would come. The cameras kept rolling. Inside the dressing room hung a thick silence. André sat down, his hands covering his face. "Mr. Rieu," Marlowe began carefully, "you don't have to explain anything if—" "No," he interrupted. "I must. For Eleanor, for Wren, and for myself." He took a deep breath. "Eleanor and I met in Vienna, at the conservatory. She was the most talented violinist I had ever seen. We became inseparable. I wrote this melody for her, one evening after a concert where she had helped me when I wanted to give up." Dashiell opened his tablet and showed an old digitized file. "Maestro, this was in the old archives of your sheet music library. The file name is 4E. The structure is the same melody as the music box." André looked at the score on the screen. The notes seemed to smile at him, as if fate was challenging him. "I wrote this in 1990, after a concert in Vienna. Eleanor was the guest soloist. She helped me when I wanted to quit. I promised I would complete the song with her, but she left before that could happen." Marlowe observed him in silence. "I think she never forgot you," she said softly. But then something strange happened. Wren, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, suddenly stood up. "Mr. André," she said in a voice that sounded too old for her age, "Grandma wants you to know that she didn't leave because she wanted to." Everyone looked at her, shocked. "Wren?" Marlowe's voice trembled. The girl kept talking, her blind eyes fixed on André as if she could see him. "She had to leave because someone forced her. Someone who didn't want you to be together." André's face froze. "Who? Who would—" "A man named Silas. He said that if she didn't leave, your career would be destroyed." The name hit André like a hammer blow. Silas. Silas Thornwood, the old violin maker from Boston. His mentor. The man who had taught him everything he knew about music. "But why would Silas cool?" he began, but his voice died away. Dashiell already had his laptop open and began searching. "Maestro, there's a Silas Thornwood who still lives in Boston. He has a small workshop in the North End." André stood abruptly. "I need to speak with him now." But Marlowe stopped him. "Wait, there's more you need to know." She pulled an old camera from her bag and showed him a faded photo. In the photo stood 3 people. Eleanor, younger and radiant, André, also young and full of hope, and between them, Silas, with an expression that wasn't quite friendly. "My mother kept this all those years," Marlowe said. On the back she wrote, "The day everything changed." André's hands trembled as he took the photo. When was this? According to the date, the evening before she disappeared. A sudden knock on the door interrupted them. A producer stuck his head inside. "Mr. Rieu, the audience is getting restless. They're asking what's happening." André looked at Wren, who still stood with that strange expression. "We're going back to the stage," he decided. "But first, Dashiell, can you bring Silas Thornwood here?" "Maestro, it's already almost 10 o'clock at night." "I don't care about the hour. Find him. Bring him here. This night doesn't end until I know the truth." Dashiell nodded and ran off. André, Marlowe, and Wren returned to the stage. The audience burst into applause when they appeared, but there was a tension in the air that was palpable. "Ladies and gentlemen," André began, his voice amplified by the microphone, "what's happening here tonight is extraordinary. I asked you to wait because sometimes the truth needs time to reveal itself." He looked at Wren. "This girl, Wren, is the granddaughter of the woman I loved, and the melody she sings is the song I wrote for her grandmother 35 years ago." The audience whispered, fascinated. "But there's a mystery here. A mystery I'm going to solve tonight with all of you as witnesses." At that moment, Dashiell appeared again, out of breath. "Maestro, Silas Thornwood is here, but he refuses to come inside." André's jaw tightened. "Bring him to the stage." But now, a few minutes later, an old man appeared at the side of the stage. He was small, bent by the years, with a long white beard. His eyes, however, were still sharp and alert. When Silas saw André, he stopped. His face showed a complex mixture of emotions, regret, fear, and something that looked like shame. "André," he said, in a soft, fragile voice. "Silas, after all these years." The two men stood facing each other while the audience watched in tense silence. "Why are you here?" Silas asked. "Because a little girl just told me that you forced Eleanor to leave. Is that true?" The old man closed his eyes. A single tear rolled down his cheek. "Yes," he whispered. "It's true," the audience collectively gasped. André felt his world tilt. "Why? Why would you do that?" Silas opened his eyes and looked directly at André. "Because Eleanor was my daughter." The silence that followed was absolute. Marlowe, hearing this, staggered. Dashiell caught her. "What?" André's voice was barely a whisper. "Eleanor was my daughter," Silas repeated. "I had met her mother in Vienna years earlier, but we couldn't marry. She came back to America, pregnant. I knew nothing of Eleanor until she was grown and came to me, searching for her father." He looked at the audience, who listened breathlessly. "When I discovered that she and André had fallen in love, I became possessed by fear. André was my student, my protégé. How could I tell him that the woman he loved was my daughter?" André shook his head, unable to believe it. "So you threatened her? You forced her to leave?" "I told her that if she stayed, I would destroy your career. I would spread false stories, ruin your reputation. Eleanor knew me. She knew I would do it." Silas's voice broke. "So she left, to protect you, and I lost both of them, her and you." Wren, who had heard all this, suddenly walked forward. She reached out her hand, feeling until she found Silas's hand. "You're my great-grandfather," she said simply. The old man began to sob. "Yes, child, I am." André stood there, overwhelmed by waves of emotion. Anger, grief, understanding, and something else. Something that felt like the beginning of forgiveness. But there was still one question. "Silas," he said slowly, "where did Eleanor go? What happened to her?" The old man looked at Marlowe. "She went back to Vienna. She married a good man, a music teacher, they had children, and she lived happily, I think. Or as happy as she could be with a broken heart." Marlowe wiped tears from her cheeks. "My father, he knew everything. He loved my mother despite everything, and when he died, she finally told us the truth." André looked at the sky, at the stars above Boston. "Eleanor," he whispered, "what have you done?" And then, as if in answer, Wren's music box began to play again. But now it sounded different, fuller, more complete, as if it had finally found the harmony it had been seeking for 35 years. Symphony Hall was so quiet that one could hear the wind whisper through the trees outside. André stood in the middle of the stage, surrounded by the fragments of a past he thought he had buried. Silas sank into a chair that Dashiell had hastily brought. The old violin maker looked smaller than ever, as if the weight of his secret had consumed him for years. "There's more," Silas said suddenly. His voice was weak, but everyone heard him in the dead silence. André turned around. "More? What more could there be?" "The melody you wrote for Eleanor. It wasn't finished, was it?" André nodded slowly. "I wanted to complete it with her. We had agreed to write the last 4 bars together on our wedding day. She wrote them," Silas said, "alone, by herself, the night she left." Marlowe's eyes widened. "How do you know that?" "Because she sent them to me. A letter with the completed score. She wrote, 'Give this to André when the time is right. He'll know when that is.'" The audience shifted restlessly. Cameras zoomed in on André's face, which displayed a range of emotions. "Where is that score?" André asked, his voice tense. Silas's hand trembled as he reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out an old yellowed piece of paper, carefully folded. "I've kept it for 35 years, and tonight I understood why Eleanor wanted me to wait." He handed it to André, who took it with trembling hands. When he unfolded it and saw the notes, an expression of disbelief appeared on his face. This is beautiful," he whispered. Dashiell looked over his shoulder. "Maestro, those last bars, they're different from anything you've ever written." "Because I didn't write them," André said softly. "Eleanor did, and she created something I never could have imagined." But then he saw something else. At the bottom of the score was a handwritten message in Eleanor's elegant handwriting. "For our daughter, when she's old enough to understand." André's heart stopped. "Our daughter?" Silas closed his eyes. "Eleanor was pregnant when she left. She had just found out." The world seemed to tilt around André. He looked at Marlowe, who looked back at him with eyes full of understanding. "My brother," Marlowe whispered. "Mom always said he was special, that he loved music like no one else. Where is he?" André's voice was urgent. "Where is your brother?" "In Chicago. He's a violinist in the Chicago Symphony Orchestra." The audience exploded in whispers. The cameras spun wildly, trying to capture everything. André felt his knees weaken. Dashiell supported him. "Maestro, are you okay?" "I have a son," André whispered. "All these years, I have a son, and I didn't know it." Wren, who had followed all this with her special intuition, walked to André and took his hand. "Uncle Callahan is a good man," she said simply. "He plays violin like Grandma did. Mom says he looks like someone, but she never says who." André looked at the small girl, whose blind eyes seemed to see so much. "Wren," he said softly, "would you like to help finish this melody, the way your grandmother intended it?" The girl nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, Grandma sings it to me sometimes. I know it by heart." "Sings?" Marlowe looked amazed at her daughter. "Wren, Grandma's not here anymore, but I hear her," Wren said with that matter-of-factness of children who perceive the world differently. "Especially when the music box plays." A cold gust of wind blew across the stage again, despite the windless evening. Some people in the audience shivered. Silas looked up, his old eyes suddenly clear. "Eleanor is here," he whispered. "I feel her. She's here to see how her story ends." Dashiell, always the pragmatist, shook his head. "That's not possible." But at that moment something inexplicable happened. All the lights on the stage flickered simultaneously. Then one by one they went out. Except for a single spotlight that shone precisely on Wren, the audience collectively held its breath. In that circle of light, Wren began to sing, but her voice sounded different now, stronger, purer, with a quality no one had heard before. "When the stars are falling, can you hear my song? When the wind goes still, does your sound remain?" André quickly grabbed his violin. Without thinking, he began to play, following the score Eleanor had written. The notes flowed from his instrument as if they had been waiting 35 years. The orchestra, still in their seats, spontaneously began to play along. No one had asked them to, but they couldn't help it. The music called to them, and then it happened. As the melody reached its climax, Wren opened her eyes. Her blind, milky eyes suddenly reflected the golden light of the spotlight, and for one brief, impossible moment, they seemed to focus directly on André. "I see you," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the music. "Grandma says you must forgive yourself, Silas, and her." Tears streamed down André's face as he continued playing. The music filled Symphony Hall, rose to the stars, rolled over the historic buildings of Boston. People in the audience began to cry without knowing why. Camera operators wiped their eyes as they kept filming. Even Dashiell, the practical technician, felt something in his chest break and heal at the same time. When the last note faded away, Wren stood for another moment with that strange clarity in her eyes. Then slowly the milky haze returned, and she was again the blind girl she had always been. But she smiled, a smile so radiant it seemed to light up the entire night. "Thank you, Mr. André," she said. "Grandma is happy." The audience burst into applause, but it wasn't the usual applause of a concert. It was something deeper, a collective release of emotion, wonder, and something that felt like witnessing a miracle. André knelt by Wren and embraced her gently. "Thank you, little one. You've given me something I thought I'd lost." "What?" she asked curiously. "Hope and forgiveness." The days following the concert on Symphony Hall changed everything. Video footage of that evening went viral around the world. People shared it, cried over it, and millions of comments spoke of the impossible moment when Wren's blind eyes seemed to focus on André. Scientists tried to explain it. Doctors were interviewed, but no one could give a definitive answer. Some things, it seemed, escape rational explanation. In his apartment in Boston, André sat at his desk, staring at the completed score that Eleanor had left behind. Next to him lay a photo, the only one he had kept, of Eleanor and him, young and hopelessly in love, before a concert in Vienna. His phone rang. It was Marlowe. "Mr. Rieu, I spoke with my brother. Callahan wants to meet you." André's heart jumped. "When?" "Tomorrow. He's coming to Boston." "But Mr. Rieu, he's angry. Not at you, but at Mom. He feels betrayed that she never told him the truth." "I understand. Tell him I'll be here. And Marlowe, thank you for everything." That night André couldn't sleep. He walked through his apartment, his thoughts a tangle of emotions. He had a son, a grown son he had never known. How do you begin such a conversation? The next afternoon, Callahan Ashford arrived at André's apartment. He was a tall man in his early 40s, with dark hair and the same intense eyes as his mother. And when André saw him, he also recognized something else, his own features, subtle but unmistakable. "Mr. Rieu," Callahan said stiffly. "André, please, come in." They sat across from each other in the living room, the silence heavy between them. "Marlowe told me everything," Callahan began, "about you and Mom, about Silas, about why she left." "Callahan, let me finish, please." Callahan's voice was tense. "My whole life I wondered why I was different, Why I felt music in a way no one else in the family seemed to understand. Dad was a good man, and he loved me. But I always saw a sadness in Mom's eyes when I played violin. He looked directly at André. Now I know why. Every time she looked at me, she saw you. André felt tears well up. I'm sorry. I knew nothing. I know that. And that's why I'm not angry at you. But at Mom, his voice broke. Why didn't she tell me? I had the right to know who my father was. She was protecting you, said a voice from the door. It was Silas, whom Marlowe had called and who had come. Just like she protected André, just like she protected me from my own foolishness. Callahan stood up, his posture defensive. And who are you? I'm the man who caused all this. I'm your grandfather, Callahan, and the biggest mistake of my life. Slowly, with much pain and many tears, Silas told his story again. He spoke of his fear, his threats, and how Eleanor had forgiven him despite everything. Before she died, Silas said softly, Eleanor visited me one last time. She was already sick. She said, Dad, you must give the music box to Wren, and when the time comes you must bring André and Callahan together. Promise me. He looked at both men. I kept that promise. Too late, perhaps. But I did it. Callahan sank back into his chair, overwhelmed. Mom knew this would happen. Eleanor knew many things, André said softly. She had a gift for looking into hearts. That's why I loved her. Do you still love her? Callahan asked suddenly. André was silent for a long moment. A part of me will always love her, but I've also learned to move on, to live, and now, he looked at Callahan, now I have a chance to know something I thought I'd lost. A son. Callahan's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to feel about this. You don't have to feel anything, André said. We have time. We can get to know each other, slowly. No pressure, no expectations. Just two musicians who happen to be family. A faint smile appeared on Callahan's face. Happen to be? Okay, maybe not happen to be. Eleanor's hand in everything, without a doubt. Marlowe, who had been listening in the doorway, came inside. Callahan, there's something else you need to know. Wren, she keeps asking about you. She says Uncle Callahan has music inside him like Mr. André. Callahan wiped his eyes. I'd like to meet her. Really meet her, I mean. Marlowe says she has something special. She does, André agreed. A connection with music I've rarely seen. And with Eleanor somehow. Do you really think Mom was there that evening on stage? Callahan asked. André thought about the moment when the lights flickered, when Wren's eyes seemed to focus, when the music changed from something human to something more. I don't know, but I like to believe that love finds a way to continue even when the body stops. Silas nodded. Eleanor promised me she would return if there was a way. Maybe she did, through Wren. The next day, André organized a small private gathering. Only family and a few close ones. Dashiell was there, and some members of the orchestra. They gathered in the small auditorium of André's music school. Wren sat centrally, her music box on her lap. Callahan sat next to her, nervous but interested. Wren, André said softly, will you sing for us? She nodded and opened the music box. The familiar melody began. But when Callahan picked up his violin, a beautiful instrument his mother had left him, and began to play along, something magical happened. The music synchronized perfectly. Father and son, who had never known each other, played together as if they had practiced their whole lives. Wren's voice rose above, clear and pure, and in that space everyone felt it. Eleanor's presence, her love, her forgiveness, flowing over them all. When the song ended, Callahan embraced André for the first time. Thank you, he whispered, for giving me a father, finally. André held his son and felt decades of emptiness begin to fill. No, thank Eleanor. She was always the smartest of us all. 3 months passed since that eventful evening at Symphony Hall. Boston had slowly returned to its normal rhythm, though tourists now often stopped at the place where the miracle had occurred, hoping perhaps to catch a glimpse of something extraordinary. In André's music school, something new had been born, a special program for children with visual impairments. Wren was the first student, and her progress was remarkable. Not that her sight had returned, that hadn't happened, despite what some thought they had seen that evening. But her musical talent bloomed in a way that even experienced teachers found astonishing. She hears things others don't hear, said Callahan, who regularly came to Boston to teach alongside André, just like Mom did. The relationship between father and son grew slowly but steadily. They shared not only music, but also stories. Callahan about his childhood, André about his career and dreams. And slowly, the gap of 35 years of missed time began to fill. Silas, the old violin maker, had opened his workshop for the program. He repaired instruments for free for the children, and told them stories about the great musicians he had known. And in his spare time he worked on something special, a new violin, constructed with the same wood he had once used for Eleanor's instrument. "Who is it for?" André had asked when he visited the workshop. "For Wren," Silas had answered, "when she's old enough to play. It's my way of making amends for what I caused." On a sunny morning in June, the family gathered again in André's music school. There was a special reason: the premiere of the completed song, now officially titled Eleanor's Song, which would be performed by the Johann Strauss Orchestra, with Callahan as soloist and Wren as singer. But before the rehearsal began, André had organized a surprise. "Wren," he said, kneeling by the girl, "there's someone who wants to meet you." A middle-aged woman came forward. She had Eleanor's eyes and smile. "This is Ramona," André said. "Your great-aunt, Eleanor's sister." Marlowe gasped. "Aunt Ramona, but Mom always said you lived in California." "I did," Ramona said with a soft voice that echoed Eleanor's melodious tone. "Until André found me and told me what had happened, I had to come." She looked at Wren, and tears streamed down her cheeks. "You look exactly like your grandma when she was young." Wren smiled. "Grandma tells me about you. She says you were the funny one." Ramona laughed through her tears. "She tells you about me?" "Of course. She talks to me often through the music." The adults exchanged glances, not sure what to make of Wren's words, but they had learned that the girl perceived things in ways they couldn't understand. "Ramona," André said, "there's someone else. Callahan, your nephew." The two looked at each other, and the family resemblance was unmistakable. Ramona embraced Callahan tightly. "Eleanor would have been so proud," she whispered, "of both of you." Silas, who had been sitting in the corner, slowly stood and walked toward Ramona. They hadn't seen each other since Eleanor's funeral. "Ramona," he said simply. "Silas." Her voice was cool but not hostile. "I have no excuses for what I did, but I hope that one day you can forgive." Ramona looked at him for a long time, then she said, "Eleanor forgave you. Who am I to do less?" She embraced the old man, and Silas began to cry. Real, deep sobs of a man finally releasing the burden of decades of regret. Dashiell, who was documenting everything for a special broadcast, had to stop for a moment to wipe away his own tears. "This is too beautiful," he muttered. "Too perfect." But then the rehearsals began, and the focus shifted to the music. The orchestra took their places. Callahan stood center with his violin, Eleanor's violin, which Ramona had brought from California. Wren stood next to him, her small hands folded, ready to sing. André raised his conductor's baton. "For Eleanor," he said softly. The first notes filled the space, rich and full of emotion. Callahan played with a passion that made his audience shiver, and when Wren began to sing, the music transformed into something transcendent. Her voice, though still that of a child, carried a quality that felt timeless. She sang of love lost and found, of sacrifices made in silence, of music as the language of the soul. When they reached the new section, the bars Eleanor had written just before she left, something remarkable happened. The light in the room seemed to change, becoming softer and golden. A warm breeze blew through the closed auditorium, carrying the faint scent of flowers. Wren suddenly stopped singing, her head tilted as if listening to something only she could hear. "Grandma says it's beautiful," she announced. "She says you're doing it perfectly." Callahan kept playing, but tears now flowed freely down his face. André's hand trembled as he conducted, but he remained strong. And then, in the final crescendo, it happened again. Wren's blind eyes reflected the golden light, and for one breathtaking moment, they seemed to focus on each face in the room, as if she could finally see them all. The music reached its climax, clear and triumphant, and as the last note faded, Wren stood with that strange clarity in her eyes. "Grandma says goodbye," she whispered. "She says her work here is done." The golden light faded. Wren's eyes returned to their usual milky haze, and the room suddenly felt emptier, as if a beloved person had just left after a long visit. No one spoke. No one dared break the sacred silence. Finally, Ramona said, "She's gone, hasn't she? Really gone this time?" André nodded, unable to speak, but Wren smiled. "She's not gone, she just went home, and she's happy because we're all together." The days that followed were filled with preparations for the official premiere of Eleanor's Song at Symphony Hall. Tickets sold out within hours. Media from around the world arrived, hoping to document the sequel to the Boston Miracle. On the evening of the concert, the family gathered backstage. André, Callahan, Wren, Marlowe, Ramona, Silas, they formed a circle, hand in hand. "Whatever happens tonight," André said, "remember that this isn't about miracles or mystery. It's about love. Eleanor's love for all of us, which lives on through the music, and through us." Callahan added. We are her legacy. Wren squeezed both hands she was holding. Grandma says you're ready. She says the world is ready to listen. The concert began exactly as planned. André led the orchestra through various classical pieces, warming up the audience. But everyone was waiting for the moment, the new song. When it was finally time, Symphony Hall became so quiet you could hear the stars sing. André raised his baton. Callahan raised his violin. Wren stood center, small but determined, and the music began. It was beautiful, more than beautiful. It was like hearing the voice of the universe itself, speaking through instruments and voice about love that transcends all boundaries. The audience sat captivated. Cameras rolled. But more than that, hearts opened. People in the audience remembered lost loved ones. They thought about missed chances and unspoken words, and they felt, perhaps for the first time, that love doesn't end. It just transforms, evolving into new forms, new stories, new music. As the song neared its end, Wren sang the final lines Eleanor had written. When the stars are falling, can you hear my song? When the wind goes still, does your sound remain? For love is the melody that never dies, and music is the light that forever stays. The last note hung in the air, pure and perfect. And then slowly the audience began to applaud, but it wasn't ordinary applause. It was something deeper, a collective acknowledgement of something sacred they had just shared. André bowed. Callahan bowed. Wren, not sure what to do, simply waved toward where she thought the audience was, and somewhere, perhaps in the wind or in the light of the stars, everyone felt it, Eleanor's presence, no longer held by regret or unfinished business, but free, joyful, complete. After the concert, when the crowd had dispersed and the stage was empty, the family remained. They stood together in Symphony Hall, looking at the stars above Boston. Do you think she saw it? Callahan asked. I think she felt it, André answered. And that's enough. Wren tugged at his sleeve. Mr. André, Grandma asked me to tell you something. What is it, little one? She says you must keep playing. For her, for Dad Callahan, and for all the people who need music to heal. André knelt beside her. And you, what will you do? I'm going to sing, Wren said, with the certainty of someone who knows their path. Forever. Because when I sing, I can see the light. And I'll accompany you, Callahan said, his hand on her shoulder. We all will, Marlowe added. Ramona smiled through tears. Eleanor would have wanted this, all of us together connected by her music. Silas, leaning on his walking stick, looked up at the stars. Forgive me, Eleanor, and thank you for giving us this second chance. As if in answer, a soft wind began to blow, warm and comforting, carrying the scent of the flowers Eleanor had loved. And in that wind they heard it, or thought they heard it, a melody, faint, distant but unmistakable, Eleanor's song, playing in the harmony of the universe itself. She's singing, Wren whispered. Can you hear it? And miraculously they could. Each of them, in their own way, heard Eleanor's voice in the wind, in the rustling of leaves, in the beating of their own hearts. Until we meet again, André said softly, his face turned to the sky, until the music brings us together again. It will, Wren assured him. Grandma promised music binds us forever. They stood there hand in hand, a family formed not by blood alone, but by music, love, and the extraordinary legacy of a woman who, even after her passing, had found a way to bring them together. And above them the stars shone brighter than ever, as if they themselves were participating in the concert, singing their own ancient melodies in harmony with the story that had just found its ending, or perhaps its beginning. For as Eleanor had written in her final notes, love is the melody that never dies. And in Boston, on that perfect evening, that melody had finally found its home. In the weeks that followed, Eleanor's song became a phenomenon. It was played in concert halls around the world. Musicians called it the song that heals hearts. Therapists used it with patients, and ordinary people listened to it when they needed comfort. But for the family, it meant something different. It was Eleanor's gift, her last and greatest, the gift of unity, forgiveness, and continuing love. André and Callahan now regularly gave concerts together. Their connection grew stronger with each performance, and always in the audience sat a small girl with blind eyes who sang along, her voice pure and true. Silas attended every concert, his old eyes always filled with tears of both regret and gratitude. He completed the special violin for Wren and presented it to her on her 11th birthday. This instrument, he said, is made with love and redemption. May it bring you as much joy as it gave me to make it. Wren carefully touched the violin and smiled. It feels like Grandma, she said, warm and kind. Ramona visited regularly from California, participating in family dinners and concerts. She brought stories of Eleanor's youth, filling in the gaps in the story her sister had left behind. Marlowe, who had always been gentle and supportive, blossomed in the warmth of this extended family. She had not only gained a famous brother-in-law, but a network of love and support for her daughter. And Dashiell, the technician who had accidentally found the first thread of the mystery, became the family's official documentarian. His footage of that night, and all the events that followed, became a celebrated documentary called The Song That Never Died. 1 year after that fateful night at Symphony Hall, André organized a small private concert. No cameras, no audience, only family, in the small chapel where Eleanor and he had hoped to marry all those years ago. This, André announced, is the real concert. This is for Eleanor and for no one else. They played Eleanor's song again, but this time differently. Slower, more intimate, with pauses to feel the silence. And in that silence they felt her, not dramatically or miraculously, but simply, gently, like the presence of a loved one who is always with you. When the song ended, Wren said, "Grandma is smiling. She says this was the most beautiful of all," and perhaps it was, because sometimes the most meaningful moments aren't the big public ones, but the small, quiet ones, the moments when love doesn't have to shout to be heard. As they left the chapel that evening, Wren suddenly stopped. "Wait," she said. She turned around, her blind eyes fixed on the empty space behind them. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispered, "for everything, for the music, for the family, for teaching us to see with our hearts instead of our eyes." And in the silence that followed, everyone swore they heard a soft voice whisper back, "You're welcome, my darling. Now go, live, sing, and always remember, music is the light that never goes out." The years passed. Wren grew up to become a renowned singer, proving that blindness is no barrier to greatness. Callahan became one of America's most respected violinists, carrying his mother's legacy with pride. André continued touring and teaching, now with the deep satisfaction of a man who had found peace with his past. And everywhere they went, everywhere they played, they carried Eleanor's song with them, not just as music, but as a story. A story about love that perseveres, forgiveness that heals, and the miraculous ways music can connect us all. Because, in the end, that was Eleanor's real miracle, not the eyes that seemed to focus for a moment, not the lights that flickered, but the bringing together of a fractured family and the healing of wounds that were decades old. And every time Eleanor's song is played, somewhere in the world, someone who hears it feels something move in their heart. A memory, a hope, a promise that love, like music, never truly ends. It just changes, evolves, finds new voices to tell its story. And so Eleanor's melody lives on, generation after generation, an eternal testament to the power of music, love, and the unbreakable light of the human spirit. The music box sits now in a glass case in André's music school, still playing its gentle melody for students who come to learn. And beside it a plaque reads, "Eleanor's Promise, a gift across time, proving that love and music are the only things that truly last forever." And in Boston, on quiet summer evenings when the wind blows just right through Symphony Hall's open windows, some say you can still hear it, a woman's voice singing softly accompanied by a violin that seems to play itself. The maintenance staff smile and nod. They've heard it too. That's just Eleanor, they say, still making sure the music never stops. And they're right, because some melodies are too powerful to ever truly end. They just keep playing forever and always in the hearts of those who dare to listen.